Welcome back to We Are Judging You. We are on episode 8, Boils and Boils. So today we're going to talk about really something that everybody is talking about, whether you're on the right, the left, or in the middle. I know my right and left. That's my left. That's my right, or in the middle. Or libertarian, as some claim to be, despite wearing their red hat last week. We're going to talk about the government shutdown. And we're going to move to a couple other topics after the shutdown that are sort of interconnected and related to the shutdown. But I will break those down in about 15 minutes. But first up, we've got SNAP benefits expiring pretty soon. 42 million Americans rely on some form of federal assistance for daily foodstuffs and food products. And if that comes to an end, what might happen? So I think my co-host here, Murtaza, I think he was saying that maybe there could be some riots in the streets. I don't know if it's going to get that far, but I do know that hungry people can't be reasoned with. So, what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I hope you had a happy Halloween with the kiddos, going out a lot of trick or treating. Maybe the last time people were eating in America. But today, if you're watching this on the first day that it's been uploaded, it's November 5th, and it's the very famous British holiday, Guy Fawkes Day. If you guys watched V is for Vendetta, it was a comic book, it was a movie about dystopian takeover of a democratic society, and V is for Vendetta was a superhero, was sort of like, massless fighting for the freedom of the British people, or unnamed Western democracy. 5th of November has a famous saying, remember the 5th of November, which was sort of the rallying cry of Guy Fawkes, who was sort of in an interesting time period in British history, which sort of, is similar to what we kind of feel here. Obviously, nobody should take a gunpowder plot underneath any sort of government building. We're not advocating that, to blow it up. He was drawn a hand.
So he fought for the British.
He was a Catholic member of the minority in England. England was becoming very quickly a Protestant state. There had been disenfranchising of the Catholics, who used to be the rulers until Henry VIII, taken out, everything. And then so Guy Fawkes came together with a bunch of other Catholics, as the story goes, and again, who knows what the real story was, since he was hung when his plot was found that he was going to blow up Parliament building on the 5th of November. Somebody tipped off that all of this gunpowder was in the basement. I think there was old tunnels that were underneath Westminster. And they got caught. All the conspirators were duly tried, sort of foregone conclusion, convicted, executed.
So he was a terrorist.
I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But again, he was convicted by a duly appointed court. And again, we're not advocating blowing up any Parliament, Congress, or anything.
He's a convicted terrorist.
He was convicted. He was hung, and then he was drawn and quartered, which is a pretty gruesome penalty for if you commit treason. And then they remember the day in England, but in V is for Vendetta, that was a national holiday to say, hey, we need to step up and all be like Guy Fawkes and stand up against.
Anyway,
this tyranny.
I mean, I love November so much, and that's such a gruesome story. Like the whole thing, start to finish. I like happy memories in November. I think November, speaking of the UK, in America, Black History Month is celebrated during the month of February.
The shortest month, okay. Sometimes many people say.
It is the shortest month. Very, very true. In the UK, the Black History Month is celebrated during the month of November.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So the UK Black people have like the best month to celebrate. I mean, October is probably like my favorite month, but then like November is like a close second because it's still not so hot and it's still not so cold, at least here in Texas. So
right.
But yeah.
But let's go to the snap. So it's supposed to be the statements coming out, and we've been hearing the news headlines, coming in left and right. November 1, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is responsible for SNAP, which is the food stamp program for the United States. It's federally funded, but every state has different policies and procedures, which we'll talk about. And this feeds about 42 million Americans receive all, if not all, a lot of their nutrition because of food stamps, right? And we see it all over SNAP or IBIT, accepted here in sort of different program names around the country. Because the government has been shut down and Congress has been unable, unwilling, incompetent, whatever you want to say, right, or purposely not funding the government with a financing bill that the White House will accept. Government has been shut down. I believe it started September 30th, October 1. Now we've gone a full month. USDA has said that based on the funds that they have, they cannot equally treat all of the recipients. They will be out of funds, and they do not want to use the emergency funds that have been set aside because they believe that legally they don't have the basis to do normal, regular activities that the agency is responsible for out of the emergency funds, and that it should only be used for truly emergencies. And because of that, they're out of money, and there will be no further funding from the federal side of SNAP coming effective tomorrow morning, or I guess tonight at midnight, right? And it's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't know why. Like, this should be on like everyone. I'm involved in a church working group, and I was like, hey guys, what are we? Yesterday I just texted. I was like, this might happen. What are we gonna do for people who are depending on this literally, for food, right? And again, I've not heard anything because everyone's just like, what is this? Like, how is this even possible, right? Like, this is like zombie apocalypse. No one's like planning for that, right? So anyway, it'll be seen. There is a case pending. It's been filed, I believe, in Boston in the federal court there. Judge Talwani, yesterday, there was a story about what had happened that bunch of the Democratic states, the AGs, who get involved in a lot of litigation, which we've talked about in the past, and we will again, have sort of come, and the AGs sort of stand up against the party which is in power in the White House and say this policy unconstitutional, illegal, whatever you have. They usually file it in a friendly district court, a friendly district court to at least get an initial ruling that's favorable to their side of the political aisle. The Democratic AGs are saying this is, I think this is absurd, right? That if there's really this goes through, that there's no funding for 42 million people. I don't know what's gonna happen, right? But she tentatively signaled in her, her response is that, that yes, this seems a little bit harsh of a remedy, and she wants to step in and she wants to at least force the emergency funds to be used to fund SNAP for at least however many days that it can.
Emergency federal funds.
Right. So every agency gets they get a general reserve, and they get a very complicated topic about.
I'm smelling a separation of power issue here.
Right, and I think that is going to be the.
I don't think that can be done quite easily.
Well, it's the use of the funds and whether the policy, I guess, what falls into this arbitrary, capricious kind of line. I think it's slightly nuanced, but
she may have authority to say, if you're using the funds, you're misusing them, or your use of funds is illegal.
Exactly.
But to tell the federal
you must do this, right?
You must use funds when Article 1 says the legislature basically has the power of the purse, right. So they can spend and consequently
they can
not
allocate. Well, but that there was cases that just came out. You're absolutely right. I think she can say you can use it or you cannot use it. I agree with you on that, right? And I guess an injunctive relief, she can say use it for 14 days, right? As sort of a, by the time it gets appealed. I just think the recent case the Supreme Court decided about the prerogative of the executive, the Article 2, right? To use the funds, and how they use it and whether they must use it or not use it. I think even if it's been ordered, and even if legislators like this is a good idea, we're not going to object to it. I think the executive can simply say we don't want to do it. We don't want to spend it. We have other priorities. We have other things, and without a clear mandate to spend it, we don't want to do it. I think this Supreme Court will probably support them. Now, if there are riots in the major cities or there are riots in America writ large, maybe there's a different view, right? Maybe this goes into the whole kind of discussion about making the Insurrection Act applicable, right? I don't know.
Seems to me there's an opening here that no one's talking about. It could be that the executive wants to be seen as the knight in shining armor, and this could all be resolved by executive order. Why not?
Right. President
Trump could draft up an order, open up the coffers, feed the people, give them their cake, and then he's the hero.
Right. And I think part of the thing, as we were talking before we got started, was you were mentioning something really good about state funding, right? States have fund. This is not just purely coming from the federal. It's like school. It's like education, right?
Yeah.
There's a pocket from the school, states, and then there's stuff from the federal. So talk a little bit about what you think how the states could play.
So first, they need to look at affordability. A lot of states are saying they can't afford it. because those funds are they're donated, but they've been earmarked for more than one purpose. And so states do have emergency funds, but they don't have funds to the level of the federal government. Just about every state is getting funding from the federal government for one program or another. Okay, and states have the right to also refuse funding from the federal government if they don't want to follow certain federal regulations or rules. So I was taught there are four sources of the law. Okay, you've got the Constitution, you've got common law cases, you've got statutes, and then you have federal regulations. And there are lots and lots and lots of federal regulations that come along with accepting federal funds. Okay, if the state doesn't want to follow those regulations, or it conflicts with something else that the state government wants to do, it can decline the funds, which is really on behalf of the voters, just declining the funds, and they're not going to be subject to that particular set of regulations. But I think that Congress is been sort of blamed and touted as the problem and everything that's wrong with what isn't happening regarding the funding of the SNAP funds, and Congress is being blamed for using America's poorest and most needy as like a political bargaining chip. But our Constitution essentially it plans for situations like this that might arise when there's a deadlock, right, in Congress, or they can't find something. There's a whole nother branch of government that has funding and that has the ability to spend those funds or to direct a federal agency to spend those funds accordingly, whatever's in pursuant to the order. So the Constitution contemplates that there could be faction forming going on in Congress. There could be large private interests that swoop in and make a bunch of donations to congressmen and women to vote one way or don't vote this way because it affects that private political interest. And yet there still are other ways for the government to function and the government to operate. The government is not just Congress. It's all the federal agencies, it's all of the executive, it's all of the federal judiciary. The government is huge. So there is another way. If Congress can't figure out a way by tomorrow or whenever the deadline expires, the executive could step in and relieve a lot of this pressure. Mm-hmm. And if the executive is quiet about it or outright refuses to do anything, then I think the 42 million folks who were relying on bread and milk on Monday and eggs on Monday and who may not get it, of that group, they need to think about that the next time they go to the polling place, which I actually voted today. Texas has 17 constitutional amendments that are on the ballot. I voted for every one of them today. I didn't vote for all of them. I thought some of them were not so great ideas, but it's important to exercise your right to vote, because what we are seeing during this presidency is probably the most prolific use of the executive pen that we've seen in the last 50 or so years. And I'll be honest with you, I don't hate everything that the president has done. There have been some very creative things and some very good things that I think have come out of the executive order. Things like, the military was desegregated by executive order. A lot of good things have happened by executive order. And I think that this administration has sort of continued in that practice and that tradition, but it can't all be for private political interest. Eventually, there's America is almost like it's like a pyramid, and you've got the billionaires and everybody rich sitting at the top, and then you have different levels of everyone else at the bottom. And the problem is that if we have a 42 or 50 million Americans who are making up a core part of the foundation of America, we are literally bringing our own house down by not giving those who qualify, because I'm a big thing on that, those who qualify for SNAP benefits should absolutely receive them. and receive them, and receive them timely.
Right.
So
So in 2 points, right? So one is you mentioned voting, and I'm going to get to in a second. But talking about history, you talk about English, history, Rome, right? That was always and the French Revolution, and you always heard the famous Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake," right? When they didn't have food for the breads and the riots and all that, right? Like, are we at that moment, or in Rome, right? The thing that the emperors had to do when when you had the Roman Empire was breads and circus, breads and circus. We heard that so much when we were learning about Roman history, right? Yeah. But as long as you could basically do whatever, have the wars, do whatever, run it however you want, the corruption, the intrigue, and all of that, right? As long as your populace was fed and had something to entertain, right? And thinking about it, right? The bread, it's there. Food is relatively cheap in America. I know Biden years messed that up with inflation and how expensive grocery got, and maybe this is an after effect. Maybe we would have had more emergency funds if groceries weren't so damn expensive, for the last 4 years. But that being said, the circus, I think it's the social media that we have, right? It's the thing that the free entertainment that anyone can get on their phone and get it. But so what I'm trying to get to is, you're talking about voting, and that's probably the last, thing that everyone has a chance to actually affect, government and say, look, that's the last thing, right? Like, we're seeing the elections in New York. People are fed up with high prices for rent and maybe government, and they're saying, let's get rid of the establishment candidates and we're going to go with Zohran Mamdani, right? That's part of the feeling that we're getting. When it comes to voting, so there's going to be midterm elections next year in 2026 and a presidential election in 2026. 2028.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a lame duck president, unless you were last time talking about third term that Steve Bannon's been talking about. I don't think it's going to happen. But let's say we get beyond that, we have a new president coming in January 20th, 2029. What are voters going to do? You think, who are they going to blame for this shutdown and the food, potential food fiasco, or you don't think it's going to have an effect? What do you think?
I think if everybody's eating at that moment, I think that America has the attention span of about 15 minutes. And then after that, people are just going to care about what's going on in their daily lives. I don't think it'll have much of a political effect in the long term. However, it's interesting you brought up Rome. Septimius Severus was one of the most powerful Roman generals, who then became emperor of Rome after a brief civil war. Okay, he was from Libya, which is in North Africa. His family were huge into agriculture, and they essentially were at the tip of the breadbasket of Rome. So they were selling food to Rome. Really, I guess this really does connect to America, for many, many years, and they became, by our standards, billionaires. Okay, so they took their wealth, I guess, and they were able to raise armies to protect what their holdings were. They were able to they became a very large private political interest that had influence in the Roman Senate. And one of its sons, Septimius, was in the Roman army, worked his way up the ranks, became a general, and then defended Rome when there was some domestic unrest, domestic terrorism. And then the Senate crowns him emperor. He was emperor for 25, almost 30 years, did many, many awesome things for the empire, expanded the empire. Guy from North Africa, okay? But when he died, on his deathbed, he had 4 sons. And when he died on his deathbed, he said, to keep the power, what you got to do is you have to pay the army, feed the army, and basically F everybody else, okay? And that's probably as true then as it is now. As long as America's defenses are in order, as long as our armed forces are, paid and fed, I think America's still going to be here. But Rome faced something that America is facing now, which is domestic terrorism. You can be torn apart from within. Right. And that's what I think is, that's going to feed a lot of these far right or far left political ideologies. A lot of these folks who are on watch lists, they're about to have 42 million new recruits when you think about it.
Wow.
Because you'll have, I mean, that's nearly 350 million people in this country. So that's over 10% of the country, right? So it's like you're about to have all these new recruits because there's going to be anger here. And I think these 50 million Americans are going to find food somewhere, whether it's church or a state agency or a local organization. There's things are going to change. Do I think that there are going to be a lot of riots in the streets? I hope not. But there's definitely going to be an uptick in crime. You know, people getting their bags stolen, people getting stuck up, people getting robbed at grocery stores for food. There's definitely going to be things that you have to keep your head on the swivel.
But it could change. I mean, it could be like you said, stroke of a pen, executive order. Could be like, look, if the states fund it, federal government will reimburse. We've seen that happen in the past, right? During COVID, there were all sorts of executive orders like that. You know, I mean, the states individually could step up, and you know, the governor. This could be a great opportunity for a governor who would be in 2028 the prime candidate to run. I mean, you know, we've been hearing about Pritzker and Newsom on the Democratic side.
Pritzker's just genius. I have a whole story about him.
Governor of Illinois, governor of California are supposed to be the strongest candidates for the Democrat side. On the Republican side, probably this is an opportunity for DeSantis and maybe even our own governor, Governor Abbott, to step up and say, you know what, our state will feed our people, right? This could be a great opportunity, right, for leadership to come through like that. And again, this is like you're talking about, you know, the Roman emperors, they made their times in times of crisis. That's when you got the next emperor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see if it happens. You're right. I don't think they're going to let people starve because just the ramifications of that in the video. And I think, you know, instantly the world will be like, you guys want to tell us anything, right? We are scared of you militarily, but you can't even feed your own people. I think China becomes, you know, not a rival peer, it becomes the number one if that happens.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a sustained amount of time. And I think it would be a tragedy. I mean, you know, we're the land of like eating contests and, you know, endless buffets and all you can eat and like, you know, everyone's obese and now everyone's on GLP or whatever, right? To not be able to have hunger in a country like this, I mean, to me, it's a supreme tragedy, right? I mean, they say normally 1 out of 8 people in America is underfed or, you know, and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. I'm interested, you know, from a, you know, my libertarian kind of, you know, inclinations to see if private society will step up. Maybe not. Maybe this is a golden opportunity to be like, look, what got us to this point? It was not the teat of the government, you know, welfare, right? What got America to its greatness was individuals and communities and religious organizations and the people, right? That's what we did, right? That we would feed and, you know, come up with innovative ideas. I mean, the Industrial Revolution really was born here. All of the sort of things, you know, the breadbasket of the world is America, right? So it'll be interesting to see if people will step up and take this. I mean, I know a lot of churches and food pantries are stocking up. I think I don't know how long people can sustain their neighbors, right? But I feel like the American urge is to do good, especially if they see stuff, right? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But if there's 42 million hungry people next week, I mean, the American experiment of the 20th century has failed, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also want to reach out to our New York viewers and say a few words about that upcoming election with Mamdani and well, I guess who's going to be his
Mamdani?
Cuomo? Is Cuomo going to take it? I think
if New York elects Cuomo after everything, killing the seniors and
I think Mayor Adams is out.
I mean,
now.
he's out. He quit.
So
he said he endorsed Cuomo
for
another
election.
Yeah.
But New York is such a great city, and it's, you know, it's not the capital of America, but if there were no DC, it kind of could be. And I think in a lot of people's hearts, it's the first
capital of the United States.
So then Philadelphia was the second capital.
Correct.
Okay,
right.
And then DC was the third capital. So that's a little history. So New York was the first capital. I think established in like 1624 in June by the Dutch. So New York is kind of like, it's almost like a Virgo. Like a Gemini. It's a June Gemini.
The Native Americans before that.
Yeah, but it's just be careful not to trade one salesman for another, because so many people love New York. So many different industries are either headquartered in New York or have a presence in New York, just because they think it's good for their own internal strategy. you have to be in New York. Real estate has never been too cheap in the city, and it's probably not going to change in the near future.
Yeah.
So you just have to be careful for anybody coming and promising you the rent that you pay. Because I was looking at a real estate broker the other day. New York has something like a 99%, 99.5%, or 98% occupancy rate. That means there's almost nothing that's vacant. There's almost nothing. As soon as something is on the market, it's off the market immediately.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of demand, you can freeze rents, but you have to think about every time you have a cause of a problem, and then you try to fix the problem. You got to be careful you don't cause other problems in the solution. Okay, and so if you freeze rents, the price of materials, building materials, that's always going up. What landlords are going to do is they'll look at what's coming in on the rent roll, and they're going to have to make some decisions. They own the property. Those decisions are then going to almost immediately affect the tenant. So it's going to be things like how quickly you can get your plumbing fixed inside your unit. They're going to take all that into account because all that keeps going up, but now their profit margin is stagnant. Okay. The other industry, landlords hate what I think may happen if Mamdani is elected mayor. And I don't know exactly how he's going to freeze the rent. I don't know if the mayor actually has the authority on his own to just do that.
Well, de Blasio did it several times, so the mayor has.
So maybe he does. Exactly. Okay.
And it depends. There are nuances to what they can do. So I thought you were a Zohran Mamdani fan. I didn't realize. I mean, you have some reluctance.
Well, this is the thing. He's not all bad, right? But it's like you have to understand that politicians in this country are rewarded when they sell the American people snake oil, because we love our snake oil. We can protects us in the summer. It smells like a snake. We love it's just a break from our normal, boring, go to sleep, wake up, pay bill lives. Is a politician coming in here and telling you, hey, I'm about to freeze your rent. You can believe it all you want, but it's gonna have a ripple effect. And if developers can't get loans from the banks because it's no longer profitable to build someplace where your income is fixed in a place as expensive, because the prices of everything is going to go up. You can freeze the rent all you want. Everything else is still going to go up. Groceries, gas, the price of land, air, whatever. Everything is going to go up. If they can't build because they can't get loans from the banks to continue developing New York, which has a serious housing problem as we sit here right now, all that's going to freeze up too. So you're going to get stuck. All the infrastructure in New York is going to just get older and older.
And I get it, but I mean, look, I think part of the thing, I mean, talking about the housing with Zohran Mamdani, I think part of it is he is the first of the young generation who's stepping up, right? You get your almost 80-year-old Trump, 80 what he was, Biden, right? This old, even in the Senate, right? Like everyone is like 60 plus. Like we think Schumer's young compared to Biden and McConnell, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not. I mean, these are like lifelong politicians, and this is the establishment. This is the Uniparty, the Democrat, Republican, older people, who are basically the same thing. It's just slight variations of beige, right? But that's the same thing, right? So Mamdani, I think, it sends for the people a younger answer, more energetic. His social media play is amazing. I mean, he has put some hits on Cuomo in the debates, which I gotta reverberate, right? But at the same time, you're right. What does he sell? It was interesting. He was on a talk show yesterday with Mehdi Hassan, and Mamdani is, he's from a community. He's Muslim, as everyone knows, but he's a sect called Shia Muslim, and he's a 12er Shia, right? Who are also known as the Khojas from South Asia, and they are known as the business people. So that's what he was commenting. He goes, have you ever heard of my community? Because amongst Indians and South Asian Muslims, we know. Have you ever heard of my community being anti-business? Like they're the most pro-business people. I mean, you go all across any world. His community. So he's like, I'm not going to be anti-business. It'll be interesting to see what he does, right?
So then that sounds to me like he may just not do it.
Well, I think the power of the mayor is limited in what they can do. Everyone is talking about him as a proxy for the Israel-Palestine. I'm like, the mayor of New York has no value, no play on Israel-Palestine politics, right? Whatever his personal views may be, right? But I think the point here, and it'll be interesting, I know that we're coming up on the time, is I think you're right. The market for housing in New York has been inflated, I think, because of all the luxury towers and all of those kind of making it too expensive for the normal New Yorker to live, right? It's all the billionaires and the hedge funds and the social media people who live in New York. I had friends who were doctors who were priced out. They had to go to Long Island, right? But I think he might be able to get a pool of affordable housing, which is a big thing, right? Like, you don't want to have projects where you have all the poor people in one neighborhood, one building, and then that I think was a failure of the 80s, right? But I think what he might be able to do is get affordable housing in, which, interestingly enough, how did the Trump family make their billions? Not from luxury, but from affordable housing.
Yeah,
Fred Trump was HUD, and he made, for the returning war workers after World War II, he made single-family homes in Queens. We know Trump only as the casinos and the towers because of what Donald Trump did, but I think this could be an interesting play where you might get Trump homes because Zohran Mamdani is funding it and allowing it to happen. That'll be something to see. The right and the left unite. Maybe my pipe dream, right? But maybe Mamdani living in a Trump home in 2028.
Speaking of Fred Trump, I believe he was also successfully sued for not permitting people of color to stay in his publicly funded housing projects.
Well, that is true, but
successfully.
And maybe this is where Zohran Mamdani gives a little bit of a brown sheen to the Trump homes.
Maybe they can make it right with Mamdani. But all I have to say is things like not paying people's food benefits, freezing rent. This is breeding ground for socialism. This is a breeding ground for capitalism, because politicians in this country are trained to tell Americans exactly what they want to hear when it makes no sense whatsoever. They're trained to say, down with the rich, tax the rich, we care about you, you need to have more. But yet, every day the rich get richer, and most of America doesn't. So that's episode 8, y'all.
We're judging you here.
Still judging you.
From ESS Law Partners, your matter, our mission.